They've done it. Awaken Realms are officially the kings of ruining my pants because my grail is tainted. Incredible. All this fresh, new content. But before we get into it, I need to tell you a story about a different Tainted Grail. So you may have heard of Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, a story-driven exploration game for 1 to 4 players. It promises a brutal adventure where your survival skills will be tested as you traverse the island of Avalon. But the land is swallowed by weirdness, an otherworldly fog that twists and warps reality, distorting space and time. Spending too much time in the weirdness will mangle your mind and body, eventually transforming you into a monstrosity. And to avoid such a fate, you must travel by the menhirs, giant statues whose auras dispel surrounding weirdness, but only for so long. The menhirs grow dark, and so you venture out to prevent the fall of Avalon, lighting menhirs along the way as you uncover mysteries. Light menhirs, fight random monsters. Light more menhirs, fight random monsters, and light more menhirs. Wait, but I want to go explore. God damn it! Needless to say, the first Tainted Grail had some issues. It was really grindy, the balance was totally out of control, the rulebook was corrupted by weirdness, and we even made an hour-long review on it. Please watch that video. Self-promotion, like and subscribe, like and subscribe! But now, Awaken Realms has announced Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin, the newest standalone game of the Tainted Grail franchise. They've sent us this prototype version to showcase all the new gameplay mechanics, and oh my god, there's a ton of improvements. So let's quickly explain what the Tainted Grail experience is like. Tainted Grail games all got a campaign divided into a bunch of chapters. The Kings of Ruin campaign will have 10 chapters, each about 2 to 4 hours long. Here's how gameplay works. Everyone picks a character for the campaign and sets them up. There's going to be the overworld where you can put your character minis to move around on, and chapter event cards which give you flavor text and the objectives for the chapter. Your characters are going to have a whole bunch of resources that you gotta earn and spend in your adventure, like food, money, magic, energy, etc. Energy is what you'll spend to do pretty much every action in the game, like moving around and exploring your location, which makes you use this choose your own adventure exploration journal. Once energy's low, you gotta replenish it by ending the day, at which point you do a bunch of end of day upkeep, such as eating food to heal. Then go to the next day, where you do start of day upkeep, like drawing an event card, and then you're back to spending energy doing stuff again. Characters also have 6 attributes which certain explorations may end up checking for, like do you have 2 caution? If not, you trip the spike trap and take 2 damage. But these attributes are also used in combat and diplomacy encounters. Throughout your adventure, you'll get into conflicts that you'll either fight or talk your way out of using your character's combat deck or diplomacy deck. All encounters will have their card on the very left, where you'll then draw a hand of 3 cards from your deck and play cards to the right of the encounter, attempting to connect these keys to trigger their effects. The keys will say which attribute it checks for, and if your character has it and it connects, then the effect triggers. When you can't or don't want to play more cards for whatever reason, like holding stuff for a combo, bad key matchups, or the enemy response in its action chart is in a good spot, you pass to the enemy, who will respond by doing what it says in the enemy's action chart. Like if this bear has taken 7 damage on its turn, it will deal 4 damage to you. To win in combat, you're trying to deal enough damage, represented by red cubes, to meet this number. But for diplomacy, you're trying to move a red cube along this affinity track so that it's on a green spot when the diplomacy timer runs out, which I don't know why it's a different icon up here from down there, but whatever, hope that gets fixed. If you win, you get rewards. If not, some bad stuff probably happened to you. So yeah, the meat of the game is, chapter card says, figure this thing out. You wander around exploring, trying to figure it out, while occasionally getting into combat and or diplomacy encounters, all under a loop of spending energy and refreshing it the next day, causing the world to progress via a new event every day. As for Kings of Ruin's premise, this campaign takes place on the opposite end of the island from where Fall of Avalon happens. You see, in the original campaign, there's a rich and storied history of King Arthur sailing to Avalon to escape a massive plague from the homelands, and then he conquers the island in the process while putting up menhir statues everywhere to ward off Avalon's naturally abundant fogs of weirdness. But in Kings of Ruin, you're playing in the part of the island where your ancestors crash landed way off course from where Arthur settled, and in their struggle to survive, they developed their own methods of warding the weirdness using these waystones, as well as eventually having their own kings emerge. Those rulers desperately traveled to find the one true king, but they all failed, coming back transformed from the weirdness as the Kings of Ruin. Claudine the United, Amber Queen Vanita, Nonus, Bishop of the Deep. Those are the 3 horrifying threats that you'll face as... Wait, no, those are all Dark Souls and Elden Ring bosses. Here's the actual artwork. Man, I just love the conceptual overlap of huge knight with small horse, a queen who does messed up births via Amber, and a clergy dude who's all about the deep. Anyways, the Kings of Ruin will be constantly present during your travels, each with their own backstories and powers as they come in and out of the story, messing everything up. But why are your characters traveling in the first place? Well, all of them have been stranded in the starting area of the game for whatever personal reason. This dude was on a business trip, this girl got stranded from her army when they lost a battle, you get the idea. So there's a main road that connects everything called the King's Pass, but its last waystone broke, meaning no one could travel between different regions because of the weirdness blocking the path. Until at the start of the campaign, the weirdness begins to clear up, and you're not gonna let this opportunity pass to finally go home, because your characters have been stuck here for a whole decade. And with the scene set, it's time to get this adventure going, starting with the pros components. First off, the minis are super detailed as always, no complaints there, especially if you order the Sundrop version, where everything comes shaded and dry brushed so that the details really pop. Combine that with the art on the location cards and oh wow, Tainted Grail is fun to look at while you're exploring. And speaking of, the art is just as phenomenal as ever. No, even more so, both in its quality and quantity. Small cards, big cards, exploration journal, wherever you're looking at, there's some super mind-boggling imagination fuel just begging to be gazed upon. Your encounters will tell a little story from the cards, the overworld looks super cool when you zoom out to look at all the cards together, the random events look beautiful, and the exploration journal now has massive full-size art instead of whatever the hell this was in Fall of Avalon. Like, why did they make the art so small and blocked by the location's name? Oh, and the different encounter decks now actually form a cool stag skull with their backs instead of 4 skulls. In fact, for all of these component pros, besides minis look good, they're literally all improvements over Fall of Avalon's components. These purple cubes that count as 5 markers while reds count as 1. Yeah, Kings of Ruin purple 5s are physically bigger now. You see this passage in the exploration journal? It's telling you to turn to a secret, specific verse in the back, but you gotta annoyingly align this dial to get to the verse number. But in Kings of Ruin, you just put this red tinted decoder thingamajig over it, boom, done. Also, the Gamefound campaign says it's supposed to look like this. For your character's combat and diplomacy decks, you had to match the character's color with the correct letter. U is blue, Y is gray, what in the... And then you had to find the ones that had this tiny little banner under the name to form your starting decks. Kings of Ruin said, this is fucking stupid, we're just gonna put the character's name on all the goddamn cards. Yes, good change. But they didn't stop there when improving your character's components. Oh no. Instead of skill cards, we got skill tiles that actually slot into your board. Plus they got a slot for a red cube to better remind you that skills count as attribute points. No more realizing a few turns later, god damn it, I was supposed to succeed that exploration check. Oh, and the attribute slots say which ones your characters start with now, instead of doing this thing where you remove and flip over the middle of the board, which was cool and all because it avoids the problem of constantly flipping over the board to see what your character starts with while putting stuff on the board. But detaching the middle is ultimately useless past the first 3 minutes of the game. So yeah, in Kings of Ruin, the rest of the character setup info is in the rulebook, hell yeah. And there's more random details that are thematic to the character plastered throughout the board. Cute touch. For the overworld components, these waystones are absolutely incredible. Compared to Fall of Avalon's menhirs, waystones are much smaller, so they'll never block cards or other minis, especially the giant ones. And the game has them placed between 4 cards instead of directly on a card. This is immediately more intuitive at a glance as to which areas are being protected. As for the locations that aren't protected, because at the moment, the text is just redundant since you have to use the journal regardless once you start making choices. I'd rather have the backs serve some other useful gameplay purpose, and the journal just have the full art in the first place. As an example, wouldn't it be sick if every location in the game had a transformable state and that was on the back instead? They fucking did it! The backs of locations are now the weird infested versions, and some of them even force you to read secret verses for walking through them. That is so cool! Oh, I just tainted my grail. Oh, my waystones are sore. But unlike my weak-ass stones, these waystones in game last a really long time. In fact, their duration is infinite. Yep, no more time dials. So none of that dysfunctional crap where they slide out of menhirs or putting time tokens into time dials and having a token loosely spin around. Waystones and flipping locations fixes and adds so much more to the Tainted Grail formula. Speaking of, let's talk about the gameplay pros. So probably the most common complaint about Tainted Grail's gameplay was how inanely tedious its grindy gameplay loop was. It was supposed to make your journey feel like a brutal survival game, but the issue was it wasn't actually difficult or brutal. It was honestly just needless filler. Oh shit, we're low on food. Let's take a day farming this spot that generates food. Wait, now the nearby menhir is running low on its time duration. We have to get some wealth and magic to refuel it. Let's farm these spots that has us do a bunch of encounters for wealth and magic. Alright, we can now safely progress the chapter objective. We think we have to investigate this spot. Oh crap, we were wrong. It's actually the spot over there. We have to light 2 more menhirs along the way. Oh shit, we're low on food again. Okay, honestly, doing that was pretty fun at first, but Jesus Christ, once you're a dozen hours in, it becomes unbearable when you're just trying to get to the next story beat. Grindy survival makes for a great scenario, but not for the entirety of a 40+ hour campaign. But before we talk about all the ways Kings of Ruin addresses the grind, let's actually define what is considered grindy so we're on the same page. I'd say a grind is when you have to do a bunch of other shit first before you can actually make progress in a game, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like grinding in Monster Hunter is doing a bunch of boss fights where you kill dragons so you can make a bigger fuck off sword so you can go fight bigger dragons. It's really dumb and really fun. I don't know why I use that example. In Gloomhaven, you have to do a bunch of scenarios to unlock new classes to play, get new gear, level up, and progress the story. But the whole point of the game is excellent brain burner combat in the first place, so you're grinding by engaging in what you want to be doing anyways, more combat. However, when it comes to Tainted Grail, the term grind is thrown around online all the time as a negative, because a ton of people are saying that the shit you gotta do before you can actually progress is tedious, monotonous, boring, a bad grind. I'm bringing this up to make it super clear that grindy and difficult are not to be conflated, because I've definitely seen gatekeepy comments that are like, oh, Tainted Grail isn't for everybody. The brutal survival might be too much for you. Bro, it's not hard to go grocery shopping at the local forest market and then commute to work to get your wealth and magic paychecks to spend on a grimdark subscription fee toll booth just so you can go exploring. It only becomes difficult if you try to break that gameplay loop, which usually happens if you're new and haven't acclimated to how to travel safely, or if you're being an impatient dickhead and go like, I don't care anymore, I'm progressing. Kings of Ruin went ahead and eviscerated the grind. First off, you don't even need to regularly eat food anymore. You only use it if you want healing or more energy. And speaking of, you have more energy every day. If you don't fully exhaust, you'll refresh 5 energy, 6 if you ate food, and 7 if you ate while playing solo. Fall of Avalon had you refreshing 4 energy per day. Oh my god, that was painful. Furthermore, exploring doesn't even cost energy anymore. Now, only certain choices made while exploring cost energy, which feels so much nicer since you can at least do free quick peeks at all the locations you run by if you need to get somewhere further in a hurry. This does a lot to remove the need for backtracking, because now whenever you're clued in on the next objective, you have a much better idea of where to go because you were able to explore more places beforehand at a much faster pace. But the thing is, chapters have you confined to certain sections of the map instead of having the entire island to trek through. This fixes so many problems like balancing / progression issues where you explore somewhere that has nothing available until you come back later, or finding explorations that have huge attribute checks too early. There's also way more of a directed focus with meaningful story bits since it can all be timed properly. For example, the game can now track how long you're taking, and since you're guaranteed to be in a certain area, it can make more big story changing events happen, like, oh, you took too long finding the MacGuffin. Whoops, one of the NPCs came and took it themselves, and now they have different dialogue options. It just makes the world feel so much more alive instead of everyone being these static dialogue dumps that only ever progress if you do their quest or come back in a later chapter. The focused story and sectioned area also makes it way less tedious if you make a mistake while exploring, since it's easier to figure out what to do next and move there faster. The smaller map sections also makes guardians way more threatening and badass. By the way, these are basically wandering encounters, because before they would frequently dawdle about like a bunch of goofy dumbasses and then straight up vanish because a menhir went out. Look, I could spend all day on this smaller map pro because there's less less constantly setting up and putting away cards or moving around. It's less table space. There's a better flow of movement so you run to certain things at the right time, like blah, 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 blah. Trust me, it's better than open world, okay? Open world only shines if there's an ungodly amount of diligence and meticulous design at every corner and possible interaction point. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 has 500,000 lines of dialogue for every stupid little thing you can possibly do in that game.
I have to confess, I've taken a drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I still ain't as dumb as you.
That ain't no way to talk to a stranger.
I need to stop using video game examples, but it's also so hard not to when they're my go-to for solo or co-op story-driven campaigns. When the hell is Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon digital coming out? Because I am so excited for that. Anyways, what was I talking about? Less grind in Kings of Ruin. The next important thing is the waystones, which we already praised back in the components, but yeah, they last forever unless something like a wandering monster destroys them, which is super cool, by the way. And their cost to activate is never some random distribution you gotta check by looking at the area. What the hell is wrong with menhirs? It's instead always 1 magic per character and then 1 food or 1 wealth per character, which is dirt cheap and super flexible. But wait, don't waystones only cover 4 locations? Yes, but first off, smaller map, so who cares? Second, dirt cheap to activate and last forever, so who cares? And third, you don't even need to uncover more of the map. You can just walk through weirdness if you want, so again, who cares? Next cool thing to alleviate grind is that encounter quantity has been toned down. Some of that comes from all the above changes, because if you have more energy per day and generally moving / exploring more often, then you're doing less encounters comparatively speaking. But also, all the random encounter locations are once per day at a maximum. Some are even once every 2 days. But on top of that, since you don't have to constantly hemorrhage resources for the simple crime of existing anymore, you're not even pressured to try and take fights as often as possible for extra resources in the first place. And also, it definitely feels like there's more contextual fights that come up from exploring, which adds so much more flavor than random scuffles that feel more akin to walking through grass in a Pokemon game, god damn it! And speaking of the resource economy in Kings of Ruin, it feels so much more liberating to be able to walk around with like only a handful of food, wealth, and magic, yet still feel fine. Back in Fall of Avalon, it felt like you had to have around 10 of everything at a minimum if you wanted to travel any sort of distance. Meanwhile, in Kings of Ruin, it's just like character go brr. But also, there's actually a hard resource cap of 20 per resource in Kings of Ruin, which used to be something only in challenge mode, which is funny that this is the new norm because now I've never felt a need to stockpile, like at all. But that 20 resource limit is definitely a good thing so that you don't have overflowing purple cubes that don't fit into the player boards. And also to really rub it in your face that you don't need that many resources anymore. Oh, and reputation is no longer a resource anymore. Thank God, because that shit was useless 90% of the time and was annoying to track when there was like nothing to spend it on. Plus, most exploration dialogue with NPCs has them check for contextual story things you've done, which is mechanically better anyways over NPCs randomly checking if you like are famous enough to proceed. Okay, so with all these resource necessities alleviated, what's stopping the player from just stockpiling up anyway so they can just easily trample through the game, especially since waystones last forever? Well, for starters, a lot of what we've mentioned prohibits that anyways, like the once per day encounters and resource limits. But also, you're incentivized to be exploring at a brisk pace, not just because of energy-free explorations, but also, remember when we mentioned taking too long doing something so that an NPC does it first? Kings of Ruin has a tracker for how much time passes in a chapter, so it's a very clear indicator for how much you should be side questing, because having time pass means getting more exploration options restricted for whatever contextual reason, which often means less rewards, and so is technically a way more satisfying way of punishing slow play instead of Fall of Avalon having some special events that just randomly tax you for doing too well. Like, time passing feels so much more thematic and makes the world feel alive, rather than, oh no, the weirdness comes and mugs you, lose a bunch of resources. Also, another thing that helps with not needing to hoard tons of food is that so far there's always seems to be a location where you can spend a resource and energy to just heal up, so no more needing to waste a bunch of days just going through all your food just to heal 1 health per day. In fact, in our Fall of Avalon review, we brought up how there's this sort of death spiral that the game sends you on once you lose half your health, because your health limits your energy and makes it easier to go insane. Meaning that if you weren't safe and were low on food, then you were easily sentenced to an early death even though you didn't hit 0 yet, because that health track lies to you. You secretly have less health than you think. Meanwhile, Kings of Ruin has your health a good bit above energy, and the health marker is L-shaped, so it doesn't even affect your terror. Bam, still thematic, but nowhere near as misleadingly brutal. So you're much more free to wander about more often instead of slow playing for a few days just to heal from food. Okay, last bits of random stuff that alleviates grind. I haven't seen any exploration options that has you roll a dice. They've all been asking if you have 1 or 2 of an attribute. So no more wasting time repeating completing the exploration just because you got a bad roll. But also on that note, haven't really seen any wasteful explorations that were just useless red herrings. Now the dead ends are pretty much random filler that at least tells a small story with a reward, or is a dead end that meaningfully alludes to something else, main quest or not. Playing solo also got a massive buff, so you aren't super pressured into playing 2 characters for efficiency's sake, because you start with this self-reliant card that gets you an extra energy and makes you much stronger during encounters with an extra card. There's also 3 encounter decks instead of 4, which is basically a symptom of there being way less random encounters. And they got rid of the gray deck, which was definitely the worst one because it was all humans, which isn't thematically interesting, and it was also really stupid, constantly getting into fights with hordes of angry mobs just for walking into settlements. And lastly, the rulebook has a full-on, fuck it, household the shit out of so many systems with its expanded story mode and challenge mode, where it says to use as many or as little of these rules as you like to tailor the experience to your liking. Unfortunately, we can't speak to the quality of the easier/harder encounter changes because they aren't available, but those are welcome additions considering that Fall of Avalon didn't have difficulty sliders for encounters, only things that affected other systems, examples like removing the health limiter or higher EXP gains. Whew, okay, enough talking about the grind improvements, let's talk about other random gameplay pros. My favorite one by far is the implementation of double-sided location cards, because the game utilizes them in really cool ways. Even if the weird side did nothing but hurt you for walking through them, that's still a massive improvement over Fall of Avalon, just for the simple fact that regardless of whether or not there's a waystone, you can freely walk wherever the hell you want now. Because, God, having it so that menhirs made these invisible walls that prevented you from leaving their 1-card aura unless you built another menhir was unbelievably tedious. So here's the really cool part about weird-sided location cards. They'll sometimes have you read a secret verse in the exploration journal when you enter them, which can not only cause cool and dangerous things on their own, but sometimes these are incredibly thematic clues or even intentional workarounds for certain puzzles and objectives. Can't go into specifics without spoiling anything, but imagine there's a hint to explore a certain location, but then there's a dead end there, and you go like, what the fuck? What does this riddle even mean? Oh, right. I also forgot to mention that you get the ability to delete your own waystones to heal 3 health really early on. Like, what a great addition that's useful for health and clever for story puzzles. God, finding hidden paths or secrets from walking around through weirdness is never not gonna feel awesome and dangerous. Furthermore, there's even a character that is built for doing weirdness shenanigans, because Elgin has the ability to create weird candles, which can be spent to flip over a nearby location for a whole day. Super cool ability. Alright, next up, there's now 2 different decks of secret cards. Fall of Avalon just had the small one. Kings of Ruin introduces the standard sized one, which means cards from here can and will get added to all sorts of different decks based on your decisions. Also, they got rid of that shit where you play cards to the right of the exploration journal. There's now just secret encounter cards for that, thank God. Like, boss fights are actually super fucking cool now. And by the way, I will be slightly spoiling the mechanics, but not the story for a boss right now, be warned. Like, Claudine the Unknighted will periodically play his own unique encounter cards to screw you over so that the fight isn't the usual, duh, I do this much damage, so you have to activate that shitty response. That means I guarantee win. Nah, Chad the Unknighted gives 0 shits and does his own thing. Super excited to see what the other 2 Kings of Ruin are like. And it's not just boss fights that got improved. Diplomacy encounters have actually been reworked, because in Fall of Avalon, if you had the affinity marker hit the top, you either win right there or move on to stage 2 of the fight. But it didn't matter because going to phase 2 skipped the enemy's response, so it was piss easy either way. It kind of just felt like combat encounters that had way less health. This new system of managing the duration while also maintaining the marker in the green spot is definitely way more engaging. Combat encounters are still the same really unique attribute unlocking key connecting card play though. Actually wait, there was a change to how running away from fights works, because before, if you did that, you paid 1 energy and triggered the opportunity attack, which normally only happens if you don't play any cards on your turn. In Kings of Ruin, when you run away, instead you just trigger the normal attack, which means that you can actually prep the enemy for an optimal escape instead of just groaning and being like, oh, taking the guaranteed opportunity attack. The last combat related thing that's been an improvement are guardian type enemies, which can spawn onto the map from certain effects or if you encounter them but run away. Like we mentioned before, they used to be really stupid and non-threatening, but now they'll never randomly vanish on their own. And instead of being forced to fight them if you walk into them, you instead can choose to fight them as a free action. However, they're massive scumbags now because they'll block exploration and location actions of the spot they're on. Plus, when they activate during start of day upkeep, they have a chance to destroy a waystone that they touch. Nice that they're actually more of a proper roaming threat now. Last general gameplay pro before going on to the other more specific gameplay pros, exhaustion actually matters now across the board, where reaching 0 energy actually has a downside because for some reason in Fall of Avalon, 2 of the characters didn't care about exhaustion because they'd recover 4 energy regardless of being exhausted or not. Now it functions more as intended because since everyone has more energy, exhausting and recovering 4 is more of an actual emergency situation thing where you're actually buying time from future turns. Feels way more thematic and less confusing because in the past, we were definitely like, wait, what's the downside to exhausting? Okay, some rulings pros now. First, there's a ruling that says if there's simultaneous effects, you can resolve them in whatever order you want. Thank God, because there used to be needlessly confusing orders for random things you'd never remember, like multiple guardians activating. And this is just the most noteworthy part of how there's a number of slightly simplified mechanics that have the double benefit of clearing up rule confusions. Like as an example, removing the time dials got rid of the need for all sorts of annoying rules nuances like how menhirs can last a day after the dial runs out, but nothing else in the game worked like that, which ended up causing confusion in how certain abilities work that interacted with time dials. See, half the secret to writing good rulebooks that no one wants to admit is to just also make intuitive, streamlined rules in the first place that don't have these weird exceptions you need to remember. Because half the time, those exceptions are gonna have some sort of wacky interaction with another thing. But also, Kings of Ruin has a natural teaching process for the new mechanics that's really effective during your first few actions. The game makes it so that the first thing you do is explore your starting location, which not only sets up the scene for the story well, but it also ends the verse with a quick little tutorial on how waystones and flipping locations works, as well as a quick explanation to immediately add new location cards to eligible adjacent spaces whenever you move onto a new place. No better way to learn than by doing, after all. Now let's go to the gameplay pros regarding progression, which is way more balanced in Kings of Ruin. First off, there's now different tiers of items, so no more randomly finding a super powerful weapon from the singular item deck and permanently making your campaign easier. Well, technically there was a separate tier of items called craftable items, but they were barely utilized and really weak. Also, this wasn't visible on the card backs, so if you had to draw one, you had to look through the deck and pluck out the first one you saw. Needlessly confusing, glad that's out of the game because most of those craftable items are the low tier items now. Oh, and as a nice little quality of life thing, you can now freely change around what items you have equipped during the day so long as you aren't in the middle of an action. Way more straightforward and flexible than only being able to do it at the end of the day. Characters also got a rework for their progression in that they all have their own unique skills now instead of using a shared pool, which fixes, do I really need to explain this? Like obviously some characters will make way better use out of certain generic skills than others. With character specific skills, they can all be balanced appropriately for the character's cards and attributes. On top of that, your character's combat and diplomacy decks have been reduced from 15 to 10 cards each, meaning you can now make your hands way more consistent on top of seeing new deck upgrades making a bigger impact at a faster rate. Very satisfying to see your new cards come up way more often. But enough with all these gameplay pros, let's finally talk about story pros. Starting with, well, the start of the game, we already brought up the tutorial exploration, but that was also a component of Kings of Ruin actually having a much stronger starting premise and hook, because back in Fall of Avalon, you were really unceremoniously dropped in when starting out. You had these character backstory letters that explained a bit, but they also weren't really motivating since they basically said, you're our last hope, find your mentors, or save the world, I don't know, go out there and figure it out, and then you just wander around. Now, these letters are longer with 2 pages over just 1, and that's because they give much more of an establishing premise for both the world and your character. Though the first page that explains the world is the exact same on both, but god damn it, this game has a great hook that immediately feels more personal. Not to mention that it's decently common to find exploration options that change based on what character you are, which only further strengthens the already great character motivations. Back in Fall of Avalon, you had to buy the Echoes of the Past expansion to add more character backstory, and without it, your character is only utilized like a handful of times throughout the entire campaign. Meanwhile, in Kings of Ruin, shit's immediately happening. Your characters are like, I gotta go home, the King's Pass is open, and then, spoiler alert, but like this literally happens in the first few turns, so whatever. You get the Kingseeker's brand, which is magical bullshit that drives your character nuts if they don't go out to find Arthur, the one true king. But it's also the thing that lets you remove waystones for health. Oh, and magic. Totally forgot about that. So your character's like, really? I was trying to go home here now. I gotta do this, what the fuck? So then you end up battling with these cool push and pull decisions decisions about whether you want to find Arthur or find the way home. Tugs at my heartstrings. Very well done. As for the rest of the story, that's always been what Tainted Grail has excelled at, with the breadcrumbs and puzzle pieces you gotta put together from explorations, but now it's even better. Going back to that point about how there's no longer an open world and everything's more focused, the string of events that happened has never felt more cohesive. It's not even a railroaded experience. You still have plenty of agency in what order you want to check things out during a chapter, because remember that what you prioritize matters once time passes and options start closing off. This sense of urgency is so much better depicted versus Fall of Avalon, where you'd frequently run into situations where you're wasting time dawdling about exploring something totally unrelated to the chapter, with the time pressure not being some cool story reason, but just the pressure of the grind and menhirs ticking down, which can really sully the experience of finding dead-end explorations if they're an unrelated tidbit that you can't appreciate as much if you're focused on the grind or on progressing. And even when it comes to weird random crap you find while exploring, Kings of Ruin does that aspect better, not just because of the stronger focus where everything's more immediately relevant within your area, but also because of the weirdness side of locations that offer a fresh take on weird stories. Because if you're walking into fog that warps reality, then you bet your ass you're gonna see some crazy random and disturbing shit in there. Especially if you walk into weirdness, go like, what the fuck did I just find? And then later clear it up, read the name of the location, and go like, whoa, what? Wait a minute, I just realized I said a bunch of these story pros back during gameplay while talking about how it's no longer open world. Whoops, but you know what? That's probably a good thing, because it shows how well the narrative meets the gameplay in Kings of Ruin. Let's go to the last few pros so we can finally talk cons. The first King of Ruin, Claudine the United, definitely has an incredible build-up, because you periodically hear about him, you find secrets and explorations that are related to him, and you even fight enemies that fight under his name. Again, another one of those things that can be properly done because of the lack of open world. So my anticipation for finally getting to meet this dude was at an all-time high, and boy does that meeting deliver, because I felt like it was straight out of an Elden Ring cutscene, except you're reading it obviously. Man, what a way to end a chapter. But also, going into a new chapter feels much more substantial versus Fall of Avalon, because going to a new area very much feels like you're going places and something happened, because how it used to be was that you just immediately start the next chapter without changing anything, which was confusing as hell and had a ton of forum questions of people going like, am I supposed to start the next day or something? Nope, just new chapter. Keep playing exactly as is. Just get the new chapter objective card. In Kings of Ruin, it's like you found the road to King's Pass. Traveling along, you eventually run into a problem. A giant, I don't know, a fucking volcano was blocking the path. You must find a way through it. That's a chapter objective. Then you get the next chapter card and clean up the map to set up the starting location cards at the volcano area. Though you do still technically keep the game state the same, no new day or anything, but you know, hey, at least it's clarified in the rulebook now. And lastly, I want to commend just how much the NPCs are doing, along with how much you have to interact with them to progress, because in Fall of Avalon, it's entirely possible to miss out on all of the political war nonsense happening based on if you go left or right when leaving your starting area, which felt really goofy because it was like I was traveling around an apocalyptic wasteland with no one around, but then the explorations are constantly talking about all these cities and notable people, and I'm like, where? What? Who? There's a war going on? How have I not seen any of this? Oh, I finally found it. Wait, I was too late in the campaign to do anything. Oh, and it says this guy named Kevin wins. Who is Kevin? Whereas now you can get yourselves involved with royalty extremely quickly if you wanted to. And then when you go to chapter 2, it's full-on NPC dialogue tree interactivity time, which may or may not be affected by stuff you did or didn't do in chapter 1. And also feels so much more impactful, not just because of the faster involvement, but also because of the standard card secret deck, which, you know, really cannot stress enough how much story stuff ends up affecting way more of the game mechanically, since these cards can really do just about anything. Like, look, I'm gonna flip this deck over. Don't worry, there's no spoilers. But man, just look at all the places these cards can go. Can't wait to see how hilariously messed up you can get the full release game to be towards the end of the campaign when you have tons of these secret cards everywhere. It's cons time. Components. Okay, first off, obviously this is a prototype, so component quality is gonna be shoddy. Like, you might be looking at our Claudine mini and asking, what happened to his sword and that random spike in his wheel? Well, they snapped off during shipping because they came like that. They're very brittle because they're definitely not made out of whatever slightly bendy materials that minis are normally made of, because this prototype's inside is some clear plasticky looking thing. Just appreciate that our Claudine now punches everything in his path. But yeah, that happened because there's no insert. Everything came in bubble wrap and rubber bands, so obviously we can't talk about how the game setup and teardown is. As for other prototype stuff we can't assess, currently the L-shaped health markers are just the old ones, but with one side chopped off. The diplomacy duration die is a generic D10. All the cardboard is slightly low res and oddly kind of sticky to touch, which is, you know, pretty hard to tell on camera. And the time/quest tokens are the old Fall of Avalon ones that slot into dials, but since there's no dials, it's kind of weird to have them like this. But yeah, I can't wait to see what the finalized versions of these all look like. Also, there's a gajillion typos that I was documenting, but then I stopped up because that's the proofreader's job. Why am I doing that? Obviously, none of those are going to actually affect the score because that would be extremely bad fate. Plus, we can look at Fall of Avalon, which has great components, so Awaken Realms already has a good precedent on this end. Anyways, first thing to actually criticize about components are the new player aids. During the end of the day, it doesn't mention the bit about taking damage if you end your turn in weirdness. Then for the combat player aid, it's missing the victory check to end the encounter after the enemy attack, in case you have some sort of defensive thing that does damage when attacked. There's also the potential for confusion on escape timing because the rules are really lax with it. Like, you can literally escape whenever during diplomacy and only while you're activated for combat. And honestly, that distinction could probably be simplified, but the aid makes it seem like you gotta do a bunch of things first, which makes us think the escape line should have its own section somewhere else. Also, the timing for the enemy's opportunity attack and victory check is switched in the aid versus the rulebook. I mean, I'll take it in case there's situations where I can't play a card to avoid the opportunity attack, but I can still kill the monster via item or skill or something. So how about the rulebook changes the ordering and not the aid? Yeah. Also, I don't know if this is just me, but I keep accidentally thinking that the clear activation step here removes time tokens from cards too, because I see remove time token and I'll stop myself going like, wait, no, delayed abilities is up there, not down here. But also this step probably doesn't even need to be here because it's just the track who already went if you're fighting as a group, so that way everyone goes once before the same character can go twice. That, or put in a thing to say put a time token on during the pick the active character step. Or even better, just let people take 2 turns in a row if they wanted to. Then players could tag each other in as often as they'd like instead of constantly trying to make all their cards work together since everyone has to take a turn. My god, it was really slow when me and Ashton were constantly asking each other if we were okay with the other ending on this key or that key. Whoops, that's a gameplay con. Yeah, anyways, last thing to complain about the player aids is that we never realized just how wordy they are, which was great the first time we played, but coming back after a year when we just needed a quick reminder had our eyes glazing over these things. These steps really should have their names highlighted in some way because all I need to look at is delayed abilities, play cards, victory check, enemy attack, etc. Okay, rulebook cons. If you go to enemy attack under combat, it says resolve effects from left to right. Don't know why this isn't highlighted in diplomacy where that actually matters a lot more since the diplomacy encounter immediately ends if the timer hits 0. So the timing of that duration icon in enemy response is super important. Next, there's a thing that says if your group can't decide who's the active character in an encounter, use the lowest character number, which is nowhere to be found. And also for context, in Fall of Avalon, that number was found on your character backstory letter and not on something you'd look at more often, like, I don't know, your character board. Also, this rule is really pointless. Why is this even codified in the first place? Plus, there's still no rulings on whether or not you're allowed to show your hands to each other during a group encounter, like, bruh. And the last thing to complain about is how during the day, it says players perform actions one at a time in any order the players agree on, which made me think, oh, we can do whatever actions in any order as long as it's one at a time. But then there's a tooltip on the next page that gives a day summary, and it says that you take 1 action, and then players who haven't acted yet take 1 action, and you repeat till everyone's done, which really should have been made more clear in the first place. Or better yet, just get rid of that rule and let people take multiple turns in a row if the group wants. Like, what is the point of that restriction? Anyways, general component cons. This game still runs into that thing where you eventually end up with a million small cards in front of you with all sorts of different effects, which makes it really easy to forget to trigger or use certain things. There's not even a clean self-organization solution because typically I'd organize by start of day stuff, then daytime action stuff, then end of day stuff, and lastly everything else. But doing that would disorganize keeping all your secrets numerically together for easy reference if something checks if you have a specific secret by number. And it would disorganize skills that so neatly slot into your boards. Thus, we're not really sure what a good solution to this would be, but at the very least, for the love of God, do not put triggered effects on these secrets because I totally forgot to activate this one when it happened. Just put the triggered effect on the thing that causes it in the first place so you never forget. Actually, while we're at it, do this for items too. Like put ignore this if you have adventurer's kit. Save sheet is redundant like usual because again, you can just take a picture of your game with your phone. Would much rather this whole sheet just have the statuses you get from exploring, but with some space around them so you can write down notes like where and when you got the status from, or maybe you found a location that needs this particular status so you can remember to go back there. And for the last bit of component cons, we got some location card hijinks. So all of them have these 3 dots under the name that may or may not contain symbols for gameplay purposes, like, oh, this one has a settlement, this one makes your characters have a vision if they rest and end the day there. First of all, those are currently the only 2 icons that go there, so why are there 3 slots? I'm assuming there'll be a 3rd on full release. And second, I thought this was cute, because like, oh, vision's always gone to left and settlement's in the middle, so you always know where to look, right? Why, are you stupid? Nah, the icons go wherever the hell they damn please. Also, locations have this confusing ruling where you sometimes put a time token on the location itself, and other times it goes on the action to indicate that they're on cooldown for the day, which, while this is in the rulebook, is still a needless confusion that tripped us up during our playthrough, so why not just use a different component for one of these? Like one of the generic red cube counters or something entirely new, I don't know.
Forgot to say this, but the skill tiles are kind of hard to tell which ones are for which attributes since you can't see the whole icon.
Gameplay cons. I have a question. You see how characters can get bonus energy? Why are these not just maxed out? Like, if you find a way to get that much bonus energy for a turn, then like, fuck it, why not allow it? It rewards you for being full health as intended, but also if you're playing solo as Gerdwin, if you get the bonus energy from eating and from self-reliant solo buff, you can't actually go up to 8 energy, which feels awful. And if this is some intended lore thing because Girdwood lugs around a big heavy shield, newsflash, everyone is hauling around an unbelievable amount of stuff once they're well into the campaign. In Fall of Avalon, by late game, I had like 30 random objects, multiple shields, multiple swords, a magic staff, an axe, multiple helmets, 2 months worth of food plus camping gear. Like, there's no way that can all be carried while traveling. But yeah, if you're solo, Girdwood can exhaust without consequence, minus her downside, and still recover 6 energy either way as long as you eat food. All right, more character complaint stuff. Girdwood's skill, Fast Learner, is a retrain of Fast Learner from Fall of Avalon, which was arguably one of the worst skills in the entire game because gaining skills is expensive. Usually taking 8 or 10 EXP because cost scales with the total attribute points in the whole row, so it goes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Meanwhile, getting new combat/diplomacy cards is dirt cheap at 2 EXP and lets you draw 3 cards and pick one from your advancement pool. We're arguing that this is still one of the worst skills in the entire game, even with the buff where now when you get it, you immediately get 2 card upgrades. Because why wouldn't you just get a bunch of card upgrades instead? Seeing 4 cards instead of 3, then picking one barely makes a difference, especially when each advancement pool only has 10 cards. And even if that's changed on full release so that the advancement pool of cards is bigger, those cards are all going to be better than your starting cards anyways. There's not really a need to dig for specific cards to create specific combos. You're just looking for individually strong cards, and seeing 3 pick 1 is more than enough for that. I kid you not, this skill would need to be buffed so that all of the EXP spent on it gets converted into buying new upgrade cards, because during that time you wait saving up enough EXP to buy this, you're losing out on upgrading your deck every 2 EXP you get, which would immediately improve your encounters. And that's a rough opportunity cost. Even more so because you're losing out on the excellent skill on the backside because you're stuck with one side when you get it. Like, stress relief is burst healing that doesn't cost energy, so if you have wealth, which you probably will because Girdwood has wealth generation skills, you can play a bit more like a dumbass without consequence. Yeah, honestly, looking at it that way, Fast Learner probably needs to be buffed even more, like draw 4, keep 2, or look through the whole deck, pick 1, because right now the skill might as well be called Bad Learner. Also, Girdwood's counter tactic skill feels like the bottom part needs to be buffed to be able to activate whenever or not just the start, because she has a lot of cards that straight up end in no keys that discard themselves after the enemy attacks. So you'd think that the point of the skill would be to gain the ability to prematurely discard those cards so that you can continue playing cards. Next, we're going to complain about Elgin's skill, because it's actually really expensive to make a weird candle that only lasts 1 day, especially when solo, because you literally only have to throw in 1 more magic to light a waystone, which lasts forever. However, waystones can only be placed in spaces that have this black circle corner, so the value in Elgin's ability is basically entirely up to how the chapter's area is designed. Even then, from what we've seen, there's always a way to clear up the weirdness through the chapter contextual exploration anyways. And if anything, it's a really common situation where you should be walking through weirdness, which makes Elgin's downside come up super often in comparison to Girdwood's, which, we kid you not, has never mattered yet. Next, we're going to bring up various cons involving encounters, starting with how in diplomacy, the duration timer doesn't actually decrease naturally every turn. Rather, it only ever changes from external effects, like your cards or the enemy response, which was kind of confusing at first. Not to mention the different icons for the duration that we've already mentioned, because, I'm blaming the hourglass for this. There should probably be a tooltip in the rulebook somewhere that mentions this, or just change diplomacy to make duration naturally tick down. We do understand that's like this in the first place because there's some encounters that only ever go down from your own cards, which is pretty hard and unexpected, but those ones can just have the enemy response say duration goes up to counteract the natural duration loss. Next, and this is still an issue with multiplayer encounters that's been innate to Tainted Grail, which is the downtime during encounters if some players aren't involved. Granted, there's now a tooltip that says the other people should do their own actions or plan how to use their EXP, but sometimes a fight can go on for a while. Or maybe the other players are already out of energy from being low on health, hence not participating in the fight. Like, there will be reasons the player sitting out can't do anything, and that's unfortunately just kind of intrinsic to the game's design. Also, on that note, grouping up for fights doesn't even feel that much stronger to justify the increase in encounter difficulty tiers unless the fight is a long one, because now all of you have more steam. Group fights are great for dealing more total damage to the enemy, but at least early on in the campaign, it's not very good at controlling the fight, so like doing proper amounts of damage to avoid huge retaliations or setting up good keys for each other. This isn't helped by the addition of cards that require 2 or even 3 points in an attribute in order to use the keys, because these make it extremely hard to set up your friends until you all get a ton more EXP. Admittedly, if you're in a slugfest where everyone just plays a ton of high damage cards and no one cares about getting hit, sure, you'll get a ton of damage through and get the kill, albeit at the cost of everyone getting their health chunked, because of how group encounters work is that the enemy attacks after each player's turn, with some attacks doing group damage. This is typically kind of stupid to do, probably shouldn't be taking a ton of damage if you can help it, but sometimes you gotta force the issue. Last encounter related con is boss fights, and yes, there will be slight mechanical spoilers, because while they do feel long and epic, it is really funny and thematically off-putting how little damage they have to do in order to be fair. Like, this giant dude with a sword the size of a house be doing less damage than a bear. Really betrays the sense of scale and danger mechanically. exactly. But a more legitimate con for this is how when playing solo, you are for sure gonna run out of cards with a 10 card deck. This caused a situation for me where I had to run away, then wait an entire day so I can adjust my combat deck by adding more cards from my pool during the end of day upkeep. But then when the next day came, the boss moved from the spot I wanted to fight him in for story reasons. And this whole situation made me go like, wait, so you're allowed to change out your equipped items whenever you want? Why aren't you allowed to do that for your decks? Because I actually had the means to heal up and get back in there during the same day. Instead, I had to dick around and end up getting an unnecessary extra tick for time passes. Blah! And in case you're wondering, why not just have the boss fight have some sort of mechanic to reshuffle your deck? The thing is, it does. It just happens really slowly on the boss's terms. And also because of the timing of the reshuffle coming after the draw phase, you're gonna miss a draw, maybe multiple if you didn't deck out right then and there. It also didn't help that I had a ton of card draw, which is normally extremely good, but here was really harmful because you can't choose to skip the draw effects on your cards. But what's even more annoying about this is that there's actually a boss fight that does the reshuffle your deck thing properly. Like this one guaranteed activates if you need to draw with an empty deck, so what the hell? Last few bits of gameplay cons. Insanity never really felt like a thing anymore. Of course, back in Fall of Avalon, there were definitely circumstances that felt bonkers that shot your terror up super hard, so I'd imagine they'd also be in Kings of Ruin come late game, but who knows if they'll be fair or not. But also, can we just say how unthematic being insane is? Like, panicking during encounters where you play the top card from your deck instead of drawing is pretty funny, dig that effect, but the only other effects don't have anything to do with going crazy. It just makes it so you can't heal when resting, and that traveling / exploring sometimes costs more energy. Being insane isn't even that consequential, especially now that there's actually places to heal. It'd be way funnier if Insanity did something similar to how like most Lovecraft board games handle this, with a deck of negative conditions that you draw from. Like, what if drawing from said deck had you turn to the back of the exploration journal for some flavor text before dropping the gameplay punishment on you? Like, I don't know, Waystone Hallucination, where all areas under Waystones become weirdness side and all non-Waystone areas become normal while you're insane. Or like a time perception distortion thing where Guardians activate twice and you draw 2 event cards during the start of turn. Damn, this is making me really want more temporary conditions just as like a general gameplay feature. Classic stuff like getting poisoned so you can't heal for a turn, or like a temporary magical protection that lets you ignore the next instance of damage but then you lose the buff. Final con is that while the introduction of once per day random encounters on a location is an excellent change, there's an instance where it's still not enough because the location is in a choke point for the chapter that you have to frequently pass through. It was so common that I'd go here, explore, figure the thing out, next day I need to go back over there, explore, and then to top it off the day after that, I had to deliver a thing at the encounter location. For the love of God, whoever's doing the map design, please make these choke point random encounters once every 2 days if you have to pass through them a lot. Like, holy moly. Recommender score. Here we're gonna give Kings of Ruin a score by critically weighing our pros and cons against each other to see how well the game does what it's trying to do, but also evaluate how great the thing it's trying to do even is. Cause we'd hate to score a terrible game a 10 out of 10 just cause it perfectly nailed being terrible. Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin is gonna get a recommender score of... We don't feel comfortable enough giving it a recommender score, so the tentative score is gonna be an 8 out of 10. A great game. Normally, we need to be playing a game quite a bit before giving it a score. Like, for context, our Fall of Avalon review, we played together for 3 chapters before I went and did 3 more chapters myself, and then the rest of the campaign after the review. For Kings of Ruin, the prototype had only 2 chapters. Me and Ashton played through the first one together, and I did the second one myself. And frankly, that's just not enough content to determine if the balance pans out, if the story remains good, if certain mechanics that we labeled as pros actually aren't as good once you're deeper into the campaign. Like, what if it turns out the time passes mechanic ends up damaging progression in some way, or it causes a certain chapter to feel really rushed? Or what if the deck of standard sized secrets late game throws in so much crap that your event and encounter decks are now just complete shit shows? Can't say for certain. Not to mention that everything here is subject to change. But what is here, we can still pretty confidently say, yeah, there's definitely been a ton of improvements in all sorts of random aspects across the game. Enough that this isn't like some hopeful, cautious optimism when we say 8 out of 10. Nah, we're full on excitedly optimistic about this game. If you always fancied the idea of Fall of Avalon and wanted to try it but were turned off by the negative reviews, now is definitely a way better time to jump in and back Kings of Ruin. It's still the good old Tainted Grail exploration formula with the immaculate vibes and excellent presentation, just with way less dysfunction. Game really went on a diet, shaved out the whole lot of jankiness, took better care of itself. And for those of you who already liked Tainted Grail, this is more Tainted Grail, what's not to love? Unless you were a huge fan of the grindy gameplay, but hey, there's tons of challenge modes mode rules you can try out for your liking. Though now it looks like we got stuff that actually makes the game harder instead of just being more grindy. As for more specifics about giving Kings of Ruin an 8 out of 10, it's because we think that despite listing out a gajillion cons, most of them are actually pretty minor, so that plus the ones that do matter, like balancing issues for certain skills, abilities, boss battle mechanics when solo, etc., are what really sets it back. Alongside some cons that just seem to be innate to a design like this, such as multiplayer downtime, which honestly has been alleviated because there's less grind and combat to compound on the extra time wasting per additional player. Dear God, I would hate to be in a 4-player game. Also, there's that other innate issue about the clusterfuck of items and secrets you'll inevitably accrue in front of you, all doing a million different things and being difficult to keep track of. That's probably always going to be a thing as long as secrets have both numbers and abilities. The Tainted Grail experience is definitely at its best either solo or 2-player, especially because the exploration journal uses the pronoun you, which feels much more tailored to a solo playthrough. And at higher player counts, we 100% recommend having people download Tainted Grail's companion app, which will essentially provide extra copies of the exploration journal for people to read along, or you can just straight up have the app narrate verses for you. Can't speak to the quality of the app for Kings of Ruin, it's not released yet, but I can definitely stand by the Fall of Avalon one they made, and by the way, the app was free, so hell yeah. Also, groups would probably sit closer together to be able to read the tiny text on location cards or chapter events and whatnot. But other than all that, Tainted Grail's world and exploration journal has and always will be such a strong selling point. So if the cons don't bother you and you're looking for an epic dark fantasy campaign game with a whole book of choose your own adventure options, definitely check this one out, because if you think all the minis and art look cool, plus you enjoy the story, you will be hooked from start to finish. It's what happened to me. At some point, I started hating Fall of Avalon's gameplay, but I was so invested in the story that I kept pushing through, and now I know so much about how Avalon and weirdness works, and I'm gonna shut up now because it's time for Ashton's personal score.
My personal score for Tainted Weirdness Prototype of Ruin is going to be a 7 out of 10. I have a good time with it. My experience with this is actually really similar to the first Fall of Avalon run through, where I played a bit of it in a group, then handed it off to Daniel to play more solo. In this case, me only playing the first chapter cooperatively is playing through half this prototype, so I've played through half the box we've been sent. I beat half the game. Anyways, when I add this on to my existing Tainted Grail experience that we also got to work with the Awaken Realms for, awesome stuff, I'm pretty confident on my personal score. The 7 out of 10 comes from the game's essence pretty much feeling exactly the same as Fall of Avalon, with some improvements. And the main ones that stood out to me are how the story is handled and how a lot of the grocery store farming grind seems to be totally gone. But my score hasn't raised from Fall of Avalon because the novelty of the core mechanics I already thought were okay wore off a little bit more, and in some cases got tiring to go through. So my only real gripe is the combat and or diplomacy that I am getting burned out on. The beauty in this experience is not these cards, it's not the minis, it's this guy right here. This is the best part about Tainted Grail. So with this card system, I have to look at these keys that I think are too small. A hand size of 3 is just too punishing to make any decent combos. And then my candlestick maker character, Elegant, this guy, isn't that good at fighting anyways. So yeah, a majority of the counters are fighting. So this just makes the encounter system in this game even more boring and or long for me. Like gosh, I just straight up left the room when Daniel did a couple fights and then came back and started filming him because the combat still wasn't done. Tainted Grail combat. I keep thinking of something like a Telltale video game that also has exploration, some survival, and just a really cool story. There are action bits to mash buttons or react in real time, which really work for tension. Tainted Grail being a board game pretty much makes that real timeness impossible, so then it went harder on making the encounters a full-fledged minigame. Does this work? Yes. Technically it does, but it just feels a little too convoluted for me and too technical in a game I'm playing mostly for story. Combat encounters getting sprung are like a weirdness interruption fog over my thoughts, where I have to drop my imagination from the awesome exploration journal, draw from a deck of cards, analyze a unique opponent, and then try to link up keys while keeping in mind card advantage and sometimes the amount of cards played on the monster. It just feels incredibly gamey to trudge through. It's like a freaking chore. Then as a reward, then you get to go back to the actual story 10 to 15 minutes later. But then when you go back to the story, I'm going, what the heck? What was I doing again? Maybe combat 3 to 4 times a chapter max would be more okay for me. But yeah, the story. That's why we're here for Tainted Grail, King's Ruin baby, and man, do I love the story. I previously enjoyed Fall of Avalon's emphasis on world building, branching paths, and questionable allies. King's Ruin has all that so far with some slight improvements. The backstories give more of a foundation to wrap your imagination around compared to Fall of Avalon's backstories, with more notable NPCs in the story, locations, and even twists and turns, at least in chapter 1, that's the only one I've played. But heck, even the pacing feels better, with the ending of chapter 1 being really entertaining with a lot of awesome flavor text. God, like I totally understand why Daniel kept raving about all the awesome Dark Souls-y story moments in mid to late game of Fall of Avalon. Because in the first chapter here, there was already a super cool moment that I haven't seen in any other chapter 1 of a board game ever. What is that super cool moment? No, I'm not gonna say it, okay? I can't spoil it, okay? You just have to play for yourself. But I guess I'll end with saying how I've done a complete 180 on how I'm going to approach Tainted Grail from now on, because I no longer want to play it in a group. See, with the more flavor text in Kings of Ruin I've seen, there's a lot of reading, and that's where the world has more time to take root in your head with all the characters and nuanced locations. But man, it kind of feels like story time with me reading to Daniel at some point. Me read, Daniel listen. If I'm gonna play a cooperative game that focuses more on deduction, then heck, I'd rather play a detective game. Kings of Ruin just has a very unique story draw, and man, do I kind of just want to read through this journal and not play the game. Like, I kid you not, if they took out a bunch of the mechanics, like all this stuff, and just kept, I don't know, like location cards and journal, and just had a really streamlined system, I'd play the heck out of this game. I think it'd be an 8 or even a 9 out of 10 for me solo. But for right now, yeah, 7 out of 10. Some cool facelifts, it's just the combat kind of got me down.
My personal score for Tainted Grail Kings of Ruin is gonna be a 7 out of 10. A good time. Wait, why did it go down to a 7 from being an 8 for Fall of Avalon? Well, that's because for the sake of reviewing this game, I haven't been able to play with house rules, which would obviously annihilate any semblance of properly evaluating Kings of Ruin, because I'd be changing crap left and right and driving the game up to like a personal 9 or 10. House rules to change what exactly? Well, minus the boss fights, I'm actually incredibly sick of Tainted Grail's card play system. Sure, the attribute connecting shtick is unique, but I don't find it very fun, and it's also not great for multiplayer, which, you know, something like dice rolling would excel at to keep everyone engaged, because rolling dice is fun to watch, and also it's faster gameplay. Like towards the end of Fall of Avalon, you can see my more detailed thoughts in our video about it here, I was actually just straight up skipping fights because I was so done with them. After 40 something hours of this card play system, there just isn't enough depth to my liking to keep me engaged for God knows how many times I've done combat. Prior to building a deck that can one-shot everything, all you do is see if you can get the proper damage to get the monster to not really harm you that bad, if at all. That, or just end your attack with a defensive card. Rinse and repeat, you win. The challenge to this is that sometimes you get a bad draw and can't connect stuff properly, whether it's because the card isn't appropriate at the moment or because you lack the attributes to play it. There's a reason why back in Fall of Avalon, once you upgraded your deck and stats enough so that you can always connect everything exactly how you want it, ergo you're in full control of outcomes, the encounters turn into a cakewalk. So if the difficulty is coming from me not being able to control what I can do, like, oh wow, I don't have any of those attributes, whoop-de-doo, then that just feels bad. Now that it's been a while since I've completed Fall of Avalon, during which I finished Gloomhaven and played quite a bit of Spirit Island, I've really solidified my tastes in what I'd want mechanically out of games that are solo/co-op. If it's super story focused or meant to be fast paced, just use dice. That's what they're absolutely perfect for. Eldritch Horror and Mansions of Madness have such expedited skill checks and fights because of dice. And then Cthulhu Death May Die is a total shit show. You literally just throw like 20 dice every turn. I love it. If it's meant to be crunchy and endlessly replayable, give the players tons of options, cards, mechanics, you name it, for them to play around with in order to figure out how to best utilize all of it to win. Tainted Grail's combat is trying to be fast, so it doesn't take like 15 minutes just to get back to exploring. But it's also still trying to be crunchy in that you have to think through how you're going to sequence your cards and what are acceptable draws for your plays, which definitely takes more effort than, I swing my sword at the monster, woo! I deal 5 damage! Meanwhile, in Gloomhaven and Spirit Island, instead of having a hand of only 3 cards, which may not even be fully playable, you have a gajillion cards and abilities that you can just play, albeit usually only 2 cards at a time, but those 2 cards usually cause like 10 different things to happen. There's no annoying attribute checks, and there's always some way to figure out crazy combos from the sheer amount of possibility that's available. And even if there's stuff you can't immediately do in Gloomhaven/Spirit Island, in both of these games you can enable it just by doing specific stuff during gameplay. As an example, both games have certain effects that require elemental costs. So if you do the things that get your element generators online, boom, those abilities are available. It's not like, oh, I have to wait until I get enough EXP to raise my attribute like 20 fights later. But also those games have me absolutely need the enemies to be able to do some random shit on their own that you as the player then react to. Think of it this way. In Tainted Grail, if you always do the proper amounts of damage at the correct intervals, you would always guarantee victory. So to prevent that, it's designed so that you oftentimes aren't fully in control of what you can play. But in Gloomhaven and Spirit Island, it isn't always clear what should be done because the enemies will randomly do stuff that you as the player have to respond to. So the players have way less restrictions on what they're allowed to play to solve the problem. It's why those games have gameplay that holds up even hundreds of hours down the line, and Tainted Grail is, absolutely done with it. And I was honestly kind of disappointed that there wasn't a general combat system rework. Also, I hate constantly shuffling my encounter decks. This is why I'm such a big fan of the Claudine boss fight, because having the boss actually play cards on you is such a welcome change. But then it also annoys me because the game isn't exactly built for big epic fights because of how little health, cards, and options you have. Hence the con's criticism about laughing at how little damage Claudine does, plus decking out during the fight. Like, I don't know, maybe if the combat was something like everyone has a hand of cards instead of a deck of cards, so like say you always come into a fight with 8 cards right off the bat, then you roll a dice and check the monster's response chart to see what it does for the turn, and then you play your cards now knowing what it's going to do for the turn. And also have some sort of resource system or restriction that prevents you from just dumping all 8 cards and one-shotting the baddie that isn't the attribute key connecting. I'd much rather that your cards always work, but the attributes affect damage scaling or something. So why is my score still so high if I hate the combat this much? I'll tell you why. It's because of moments like this, when I was prowling through the Lothian forests, hired by the descendant of Claudine the United to plot a path in order to safely direct his caravan through the woods that shrouded his castle, only to discover that the weirdness had the forest into the most ethereal and horrifying that normally you get lost in. There's fucking trees going upside down, and then it turned out the forest threatening to me and forever keep. But then I figured out that if I destroy the and let the weirdness. God, I love the exploration journal and all the art so much. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to support us, buy our merch at shelfside.co or support us at patreon.com/shelfside. Here's the patron shout out.